West.
Yeah.
I'm checking my husband's stuff.
We're live.
Birds will go to Spring Creek.
Somebody needs to write a note and leave it on the door. But I have no tape.
Can you give it back here when you play? Today I can't hear the instruments, but I can hear the singing.
Crazy.
It's different.
I couldn't hear myself. Some of them I could and some of them I couldn't.
Me too, but if I'm trying to follow through.
If I sang like you, they couldn't make me shut up.
There's gonna be an outlet somewhere. I think there's one on the steps.
There's one right over there, but that's a long way.
There's one right there.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Just scoop that out there. We'll see if that cord will go that far. Man, this is fun, man. Get this thing out here. Maybe we'll amplify it a little bit. Check. Oh man, this is gonna be loud. Sorry, Nancy. Apologize already. Here we go. Does that reach that far?
I'm way over here, Wes. Hello.
Yeah, you're in the wrong place, Crystal. You'll at least have to scoot over in this direction, I think. You could sit in the back or on the front row's open.
What are you thinking?
The front row's available. Yeah, you have to look at the. Yeah,
Here, I'll move over here. How about that? That's
pretty good. I think that's pretty good. Let me see what it looks like in there. Let's see. I know I should stand in front of the Christmas tree. That is better. Oh, there's a whole area over here available. Anyway, that's funny. Thank you there, Mr. Hunter.
T-shirt material? Lisa, is that t-shirt material?
Hey, Hunter, how you doing?
I know, right?
How you doing, Miss Ann? Where's Goofball? What, did y'all go out yesterday or not?
Where did you find that, Lisa? Or did you make that?
Yeah. Ann Krug, yes, you walked.
That would be the good thing with that. You wouldn't even have to stitch it.
Well, you
It
too.
just kind of roll up on its own.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that's.
No, I don't ever write on that thing anyway. I would like it to where I start saying stuff and then I write it up there, but I'm too uncoordinated for that, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But they're rough right now, so they probably done got it above.
Pick a good spot before they fill up, you know.
Yeah, he done got whooped.
It's a big room.
Blake West.
Teacher's pet right here,
That's
front row.
Hey.
All right, let's see. Yeah, I'm kind of centered up on that.
Hey,
I should
what
be over
about
here.
Buddy Willa? She here?
No, nobody's
Oh,
here.
man.
Just me. I know.
Yeah.
Everybody's at home.
She blows me kisses and then y'all won't bring her to church.
What's up with that, you know?
She just knows I'm a pushover. I mean, behind me. Get behind me.
Oh, man. We're-
Get behind you, Satan.
That's right.
Oh, man. We were all thinking it. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, Jerry.
That's what I was saying. I said get behind me. I was waiting on somebody to fill it.
I was thinking it, so.
Very funny. That's funny.
Hey, Wes,
Yes, sir.
what you think about my videos I sent you?
They're good. They're good. All right, we're going to start off with a prayer for Scott. No, I'm just kidding. All right, we'll wait a few more minutes. But as we're waiting for other people to come in, another thing is we'll have to make sure we end on time. So I make sure, because people will start coming in.
Let's talk
About
Then stop.
five till or something.
Okay. That's
Just
all.
stop me talking.
I've been stopping.
Or just give me this. Wrap it up.
10 minutes.
Don't give me this one. Stretch it out. Anyway.
No.
All right. So, all right, we're going to, we'll do a little review before we get started. For those of you in the other class, Miss Debbie, who is going to be here this morning, is not here. So we're just going to combine, and maybe you guys can get something out of our lesson this morning. We've been studying the ancient relationships that are found in Genesis. And we're trying to take a look, fresh look at these stories that we've heard 1,000 times, Sometimes when you hear something so many times, you become numb to it, Like all of the ladies are like, yeah, all of my husband's stories, Anyway, but, when you hear something so many times, it's easy to become numb to the details. And you're not going to be able to hear from out there, April. I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. But we've went over Adam and Eve. We started off on Adam and Eve and creation and their relationship with each other, their human-to-human relationship, their human-to-God relationship, the relationship between God and creation. And we went into all those different things. We talked about Abraham and Sarah and Hagar and their triangle of disaster. And then we talked about Abraham and Isaac. And last week we started talking about Jacob and Esau. And Jacob and Esau is one of the most famous sibling rivalries, that we find in Genesis, which is full of them. You have Cain and Abel, and of course Joseph and his brothers, and we talked about different famous sibling rivalries throughout history. The Boleyn sisters, and of course even the Alford brothers, and then there's many. That's okay. Nobody laughed at that. I've used that joke every week. So anyway, my class is like, we knew that the Alford joke was coming. But anyway, so all right. But so we're focusing on the literary qualities of the text, and we're looking at it through some commentaries from people studying the Hebrew Bible. Not necessarily with a Christian perspective, but more of the traditional understanding of the text. So with that in mind, a little review of last week. We started talking about Jacob and Esau, and we talked about Yaakov, Jacob, and he's known as the one who deceives. And he's the heel grabber, the supplanter. As he's born, he's grabbing at Esau's heels, and then Esau sells his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of stew, suggesting his inability to see beyond immediate circumstances. He's all about the here and now. He's worldly. He's impulsive. Those are all good ways to look at that. Another thing we talked about was when Isaac hears Rebekah's plan, or when Jacob hears her plan, he initially he's hesitant because he fears that Isaac's going to see through it, and of course he doesn't. But and then in Isaac's lesser blessing to Esau, he says, "By your sword shall you live, and your brother you'll serve." And of course, I gave all my arguments, weak as they are, that Jacob is not quite as deceiving in many parts as he appears. I try to be on his side most of the time. Of course, when he's standing there and he's got the goat skins on his arms and on his neck, and he says, "I am your firstborn Esau." It's hard to defend that one. But everything up until that point, I tried to give a defense for. And so then, in Esau, learning how Jacob stole his blessing, he says he should trip me now twice by the heels. Coming back to the the name of Jacob, the heel grabber. And we saw how in that episode of Jacob's time with Uncle Laban, and then it shows us the where Rebekah came from. The household that she was brought up in is full of these type of deceptions and trickery, I guess is a good word for it. And we talked about how that passage mirrors, and it is a reversal of Jacob's deception. He thinks he's been given Rachel in marriage. He thinks he's going to bed with her in the dark with his blind, bleary eyes. And he consummates the relationship with the elder daughter, Leah, just exactly in the same way that Isaac, with his bleary eyes, is deceived in thinking that it's Esau instead of Jacob. 20 years pass and Jacob returns. The two brothers come back together. And that's where we're going to get started today. But before we get started, there's a couple interesting perspectives I jotted down that we didn't get to because I am so long-winded. I skipped right over a couple of these things. But, we discussed and we emphasized the importance and the significance as we're studying through through Genesis of the Hebrew word Hanani. And Hanani means, here I am. Here I am fully in your presence. And we've been pointing that out as it's been brought up all the way through here. Hanani is this bearing of oneself in the presence of. And sometimes it's in the presence of God, sometimes it's in the presence of another human. And you're saying, here I am, I'm responsible to you. In responding to you being here, I am here in your presence, fully and willing to do your bidding. And it's repeated and repeated so many times in these important sequences. Abraham, in the testing of himself, God calls to him, Abraham, and he says, Hanani, Lord, here I am. And Isaac says, Father, and he says, Hanani, here I am, son. And that one in particular we talked about because, we discussed the whole Kierkegaard and his look at it of fear and trembling, and how his influence on the way we see that offering and how he's either preparing him for the offering or fully offering him himself, And with that Hanani, with the here I am, son, it really cuts through all that because he's saying, here I am, son, I'm with you. So as long as you see them as a team and they have that bond and they're going up together, then it kind of rules out the whole, looking at it as if he's this, maniac who's coming up with all this, on the fly. Whatever you say, I'll just blindly do, I'm with you, son. And at the same time, we look at what Jacob's doing in the presence of Isaac, fully being the deceiver. He's standing there. He's got the goat skin on, and he says to his father, Hanani, while he is lying. So he's going to use that phrase, here I am fully in your presence, as a deception. So it's kind of the exact opposite of the way we've seen it used up to that point. And with just those two examples, we see the importance of that word with either another person or with God himself. Interestingly, there's a lot of very important passages in the Bible that use that. In Exodus, Moses is standing there and the burning bush is talking to him, and it says, Moses, Moses. And he says, Hanani, here I am, Lord, In Samuel, Samuel's asleep. God's calling out to him. He says, Hanani, here I am, Lord, I'm here in your presence. In Isaiah, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And he said, Hanani, send me. And then later in Isaiah, one of my favorite ones, God says, you will call and the Lord shall answer, and you will cry out and I will say, Hanani, here I am in your presence. So we see it's such an important word to understand in our Hebrew understanding of the Old Testament. Often in our English translations, we kind of lose the importance of what they're saying. We read here I am, and we just kind of go on with it. We don't understand exactly what that entails, And another thing I didn't think that we focused on in the Jacob and Esau beginning was, what is God's plan in this? In Genesis 25:22, he kind of lays out his plan. Isaac prays because Rebekah's not able to have children. And God answers, and she becomes pregnant, and the children clash together within her. And God says to her, 2 nations in your womb, 2 people from your loins shall issue. People over people shall prevail, and the elder will be the younger slave. So God's plan, before they're even born, is for the elder to be the younger slave. That's God's plan. God's plan is for Esau to be the lesser of the two, to be the slave, for lack of a better word, of Jacob. And then Isaac's plan, which is what's trying to be carried out, is to try to give that blessing to Esau. That's not God's plan. It goes against what God revealed before the boys were born. Esau, in agreeing to the plan, is breaking the oath that he makes with Jacob over the birthright. So there's a few more deceptions going on than just Jacob alone. Esau has already given up his birthright. It was years before this. And then for him to go in there and look for this blessing, to look for that, he's already doing something, a little bit deceptive. It's not his role anymore as the firstborn. Isaac relies completely on his own senses. And each one of those let him down, even the sense of taste, which he prides himself on. When his ears tell him the truth, he doesn't listen. He says, this is not the voice of Esau. This sounds more like Jacob, but he still goes with it, And the blessing is Jacob's, as God intended it. I think that's a good way to look at it. And God's plan was carried out. One of the things that we talked about, or I wanted to, was what is the relationship between the blessing and the birthright? I'm going to try to go through this quickly. It's in Deuteronomy 21, I think, where it lays out the birthright of the firstborn. And the firstborn gets a double portion of what the other siblings would get, which is pretty interesting. So when Jacob keeps coming after Esau, wanting his birthright, he wants that double portion. He wants what was entitled to Esau. Why a double portion? That's a good question, In this time, in this culture, women didn't own property, and so they were dependent on their male relatives. So their fathers and then their husbands as they grew up. But any unmarried sisters or widowed sisters without children would be dependent on that oldest brother once the father dies. So that's why he is given the double portion, so that he could care for both his own immediate family and his extended family in his late father's stead. And when it comes to blessings, we had a couple people ask, why couldn't he just take the blessing back? I think that's a great question. He gives it wrongly to Jacob. He finds out that he gave it wrongly to Jacob. Why couldn't he just take it back? Blessings are very interesting. I spent a good deal of my week and my study time learning about blessings. And, in the Hebrew Bible, one blesses food. You can bless animals. You bless God. You can bless yourself. You can bless meals. So when we see this blessing, it's like, and most of the time in Hebrew Bible, it's like saying, may God allow this to come to pass. That's a good way of looking at the word blessing in the Hebrew Bible. But there's something different about this one. When it comes to the, don't you have one for me? One of the most important things to understand about this part is to see what Isaac had in store for Jacob. Nothing. Have you even a lesser blessing for me? Esau asks him when he gets up to, for his chance. Esau says, but we know that Jacob's already taken it, Isaac said, I have nothing left. I gave everything to the one I thought was you. There's nothing I have left for you. I didn't have anything planned to give Jacob. So he didn't have anything planned to give Jacob. I think that's an understanding that we need to come through there. So Isaac's plan essentially is the blessing and the anti-blessing for the lesser one, at the same time. Rebekah stops Isaac from giving the blessing to Esau, as is his plan, not God's plan. I think that's a good way to look at that. So in some ways, although we look at Rebekah as this deceptive character, she's still the one trying to carry out God's plan. Oh man, that's double. We're really layering on the deceptive, who's in the wrong here. They're all in the wrong in some ways, But once he realizes that God's plan has taken place, Jacob has the blessing, and he's trembling and shaking. So the one thing that I think is important to understand about this particular blessing is this blessing includes the promise, or if you want to call it the prophecy, of Abraham's descendants. From the line of Abraham would come the Messiah. We've already established that. From the line of Jacob, not Esau. So once Isaac lays that out, from you will have this promise. You're the descendants, it'll be from your line. He can't take it back. Because, in the Old Testament or even in the New Testament, once you've prophesied something, there's no takebacks, So that is the reason why he couldn't take it back. It took me a long time to find that. But I'm very confident that is the reason he could not take it back. So, Christy, write that down. You got that? Okay, yeah. It's so weird. Christy's way over there, You just got to throw in something at some point, Okay.
I think too, like we talked about last week, it was like blessings back then were more of a, like it was just different. It was more of a ceremony, like a wedding ceremony or a big deal. Like you just didn't break your vows that you're
No.
from your wedding, so you didn't break the blessing.
That's exactly right. In many ways, not trying to be too out on the fringe here, but like in many ways in the Hebrew Bible, they look at words as if they have certain weight to them. Also, certain not spiritual presence to them. Let's just say. And another thing that people would say is, and I don't use this perspective, but this is a thing that people have said, is that as he gives this, it's kind of like he's giving his life force in some ways to this eldest son. and then he passes. He's like, I've done everything that I can. Here, you carry on the good fight, and then he passes. But for me, you really can't use that in this situation, only because it's 40 years until Isaac dies. Yeah, so I know that's pretty interesting. It kind of rules that out a little bit for me, Here's everything I have. I'm going to last 40 more years, So I don't know if that's really, but I just think that, the true blessing is the prophecy. The true thing that you want out of that is the prophecy of Jesus is coming from your line. The prophecy of Jesus is contained in the blessing. So that's pretty good. All right, so that's a long review. But anyway, I think everybody's back on track. We're going to be in Genesis 32, if I ever get started. But without much further ado, we're going to have the conclusion of Jacob and Esau today. So we have Rebekah, hearing that Esau's plan is to kill Jacob once Isaac dies. She sends Jacob away. She exiles him back to where they came from, back to where she came from, to the house of Laban. And there the deceiver is deceived. She wants Jacob to undergo an apprenticeship with her brother. I like that. Laban, who's the master tricker, so that he would know how to combine these traits. Is that me? How embarrassing. Anyway, and he receives this education for 20 years. So for 20 years, he wrestles with God in his desire to get back home from exile. And the puns are intended there. But he works through everything in his life that would have stopped him from being able to go back. I think that's a good way of looking at that. It's not my fault. Oh, it is. I bet it's on the other side of the computer. I can't see it. Very unprofessional here, but they can't see me on the computer at this point. So But no, so he spends these 20 years with Laban, and in this time he works and he loves Rachel, and he does everything that he can for Rachel, and then he's tricked, on his wedding night. It's Leah, and he's got to put in another 7 years, and he's tenacious, he's fighting, he's struggling his whole life, although most of it is through some deceptive trickery. You have to see him as a worker. He's a worker this whole time. His whole time with Laban, he doesn't get a day off, in my opinion. But he spends those 20 years, and this is where we're going to pick up, right here in chapter 32, verse 4. And some of the words in this may seem a little bit different to you than our traditional English translation. But what they try to do is they try to focus more on the original Hebrew understanding and translation. So we'll discuss some of that as we go. In verse 4. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the steppe of Edom. And he charged them, saying, Thus shall you say to my lord Esau, Thus says your servant Jacob. And of course, we're going to pay attention to Jacob's language here. The way he reverses servant and lord. He continually calls himself your servant. He is not trying to push Esau in any way. He continually keeps calling Esau Lord, and he knows what his own blessing is, and of course he knows that Esau knows it as well. So he's trying to speak softly. I don't know what the words are, but so with Laban I have sojourned, and I tarried until now. And I've gotten oxen and donkeys and sheep and male and female slaves, and I sent ahead to tell my Lord, to find favor in your eyes. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to your brother, to Esau, and he is actually coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. Now, the number 400 men, in Genesis, in all of the Hebrew Bible, it's really looked at as a militaristic number where it means this large group of men. It means like a battalion or whatever the other fancy words are from an army of men is actually a specific number, So that is the what they're meaning here. So when they say he's coming with 400 men, he's coming with these group of armed men. Whether it's exactly 400, 401, that's not the focus. And of course Jacob remembers exactly how he left his brother. He knows that this is the time for Esau to rebel, just like his plan was. This is the time of the sword. And Jacob was greatly afraid, and he was distressed. And he divided the people that were with him and the sheep and the cattle and the camels into 2 camps. And he thought, should Esau come to the one camp and strike it, the remaining camp will escape. And Jacob said, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, Lord, who has said to me, return to your land and your birthplace, and I will deal well with you. I am unworthy of all the kindness that you have steadfastly done for your servant. For with my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. O save me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and strike me, mother with sons. So he knows the time is now. This is the time that he's been running from this entire time in exile. The brother that he betrayed. You know, the first time he got his birthright, the second time his blessing, and now he's coming to reverse course. He offers him one more in verse 19. He says to his servants, you shall say, you know, they are servants, they're your servant, Jacob, saying that he is Esau's servant. A tribute sent to my lord Esau. He's doing all he can to diffuse, like what would be a hostile situation. In 21 it says, for Jacob thought, let me placate him with the tribute that goes before me. And after I shall look on his fact, perhaps he will show me a kindly face. So here with this notion of face, this becomes very important for the rest of Jacob's story and the rest of his narrative. The word placate literally means to cover your face, to cover over. Perhaps he will show me a kindly face. I shall look on his face. And he rises that night and his 2 wives, and they crossed over the Jabbok ford. And here's one of the most mysterious passages that we're going to discuss for sure, in verse 24. And Jacob was left alone, and a man, Ish, as we discussed, wrestled with him until the break of dawn. And he saw that he had not won out against him, and he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip socket was wrenched as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for dawn is breaking. And Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So that's typical Jacob to some degree. He's holding on. He's tenacious. He's wrestled with this character all night. And look at what he wants here. He's wrestling with this mysterious figure, this Ish, this angel, this divine messenger. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, not Jacob shall your name hence be said, but Israel, for you have striven with God and men and won out. And his name change here is very important. We look at it from the Hebrew point of view as Jacob. It means the one who deceives, one who is willing to outwit or outmaneuver or to deceive. And now he says that's no longer your name. In other words, this is how you've been living your whole life, through this name. You strive, you deceive, but now your name will be Israel, which means prevailing, a lordliness, an openness. There's a tenacity to you, but if you have to channel it properly. You have fought with God and men and won out. Verse 30 says, Jacob asked and said, tell your name, pray. And he said, why should you ask my name? And there he blessed him. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, meaning, I've seen God face to face, and I came out alive. Now he has wrestled with this mysterious being, I think is a fair thing to say. His name's been changed, his hip's been wrenched, now he's injured. Even, in all of his striving, the one who strives with God, the one who wrestles with God, and he came out alive. And he says, I've seen God face to face, and I came out alive. There's a long biblical tradition that no one can see the face of God and live, but Israel. And the sun rose upon him, and he said, Peniel, and he was limping on his hip. So here's our turning point. So now in his distress, he's face to face with his brother, who's come with the sword. He fears for his life. He separates his camp, which you could see that as a little bit deceptive, at least, or at least a planned out maneuver. I'd rather call it strategy. But and at this moment, he has this wrestling match where he's tenacious. and he still demands this blessing. And now he's got this name change. Will there be an attitude change to go along with that from Jacob to Israel? And in chapter 33, we'll pick up there. And Jacob raised his eyes and saw, look, Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. And he divided the children between Leah and Rachel, and between the two slave girls. And he placed the slave girls and their children first, and Leah and her children after them, and Rachel and Joseph last. And clearly, we can see this right here as if there's a beginning sentence to Joseph, this would be the beginning sentence, you know. He's already creating this parental favoritism with him. Joseph's dead last. We're going to let the sheep go. We're going to let everybody else that we love go. And then hopefully they won't make it all the way to Joseph, So maybe he's not on the right foot with that parental move. But, and he passed before them, and he bowed to the ground 7 times until he drew near his brother. So here it comes, this moment that we've been waiting for. Is this the time for Esau to break the yoke from his neck? Is this the time to serve him with the sword? And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell upon his neck and kissed him. So instead of breaking the yoke from his neck, we see what Esau does. He embraced him and he fell upon his neck. And they wept. This scene of reconciliation, all those years of hating each other, turns into a waste of time. All this time of Jacob dreading this and just probably nonstop worrying and frustrated by this turns into a waste of time. The weeping of the tears, the cleansing of the soul, these brothers finally united in one another. Verse 5 says, and he raised his eyes and saw the women and children, and he said, who are these with you? And he said, the children with whom God has favored your servant. So he's still taking the inferior role. He's still your servant. He's still bowing down to Esau. And the slave girls drew near, they and their children, and they bowed down, and Leah too, and her children drew near, and they bowed down. And of course, finally, and Joseph and Rachel drew near and bowed down. And he said, what do you mean by all this camp I have met? And he said, to find favor in the eyes of the Lord. And Esau said, I have much, my brother. Keep what you have. So Jacob's trying to say, here's what I robbed of your inheritance. I took your blessing. I have all this stuff because of what I've done to you. Please have this, my Lord. What does Esau do? He rejects it. I have much. I too have been blessed. And verse 10 says, and Jacob said, oh, no, pray. If I have found favor in your eyes, take this tribute from my hand. For have I not seen your face as one might see God's face, and you receive me in kindness? Have I not seen your face as I've seen God's face? And Jacob knows precisely what God's face is. He knows what that wrestling is. And what is God's face? In our first episode with Adam and Eve, we talked about what's the relationship between God and human, human to human, and where's the intersection? Does the face of God show up in the human to human relationship? For me, I feel like we see, God seems to be part of, a part of it when they're, not to be a part of it when they're at war with another and when there's rivalry. He wants no part of that. Jacob's repentance, coming to his brother with all these things as an offering, is like seeing God's face. So he's somewhat back on the scene, is the way I like to look at it. He's been away, his blessing to some degree. Pray, take my blessing, my barakah, a gift is another word, that has been brought to you. For God has favored me, and I have everything. And he pressed him, and he took it. So some commentators here see Jacob in this scheming, negative way, like he's trying to buy off Esau in a way. That's a common reading of this. Hey, if I give you all this stuff, surely you're going to go away, right, my Lord? And can I have peace, my Lord? Please take all this stuff. And if that's true, then what does that mean for what Esau does here? Jacob offers it, but Esau accepts the gift. It's much harder to accept forgiveness from another human than it is to offer forgiveness, because then we can't lord it over them any longer. So in Esau accepting it, that's much harder than just Jacob offering it. I think that Jacob honestly wants to offer this to his brother, and Esau allows for the reconciliation. And we see these brothers back together one more time. And he says in verse 13, "My Lord knows the children are tender, and nursing sheep and cattle are my burden. And if they are whipped onward a single day, all the flocks will die. Pray, let my Lord pass on before his servant and I, and before his servant and I. Let me drive along at my own easy pace, at the heels of the livestock before me, and at the heels of the children, till I come to my Lord in Seir." At the heels, at the gate, at the feet of. So he's there at the heels of his children, now relaxing at an easy pace. For me, which I find funny, he's finally at this easy pace. He's not striving. He's not in rivalry. His whole life has been just chaotic to some degree. And he says, now here I am. He returns home at the heels one more time. And in this story, we see, the reconciliation of the two brothers. Even if it's temporary, we know as it goes along, the nations of Edom and the nations of Israel, they continue to battle all throughout our Bible for years. But here in the sibling rivalry, we see the moment where all is well. He's accepted this gift, he's received it, and Jacob can relax. He's on the easy street. And of course, we see this as the beginning of the Joseph story, which we're going to look at next week, which is an absolute full-blown sibling rivalry. Not like these sibling rivalries that we've had so far. This isn't just the one-on-one, Rachel and Leah or Cain and Abel. This is everybody against one, and due to their father's favoritism, all the brothers against one. So next week we're going to cover the Joseph story. I'm going to try to get it all in 1 week, we'll see. And we'll revisit all these same temptations to rivalry and revenge, because they're all there. And we'll revisit the beauty of reconciliation, of seeing one's brother there in front of one's face, and then also to see the face of God. All right, so if anybody wants to read ahead, next week is chapter 37, by the way. Okay, so we'll have some questions, some comments, angry outbursts. Any random thoughts? All right, Christy's going to get us started. She's got something to say. One thing that I really liked, which I didn't really look at this like that before, is the blessing itself. It was a mystery to me to some degree why he couldn't take it back. Why? You know what? I mean, I just get for all he knew, it was the neighbor. It was someone who wasn't even related to him that he gave this to. He had no idea. He calls him the voice of Jacob, but he feels like Esau. So. I mean, he wasn't really saying he was anybody, in the blessing itself. So I've always looked at it as very, mysterious to some degree that once he gives this out, you can't take it back. But it is because it is looked at as a prophecy, and it is saying that the one who will crush the head of the serpent, the one who will come and save us, the Messiah, that is included in this, And we all know about, false prophecies. You can't once you have a false prophet, or prophecy, you're no longer a prophet. So that's important.
Why do you think Jacob wrestled with God? I mean, it's just
It's a very
strange.
it's strange. No, it's mysterious is a good word for it. I think there's many ways to look at it. There's many safe ways, and there's many out on a limb ways. Is he wrestling with God in human form? Is he wrestling with one of these divine messengers that has been giving all these messages up to this point? Is he wrestling with a man who is working on God's behalf? These are all, or an angel. We got 4 options, we'll say.
I mean, to me, it seems kind of clear that it's a messenger and angel.
Mm-hmm.
God.
Mm-hmm.
For God. I don't know. That's just my opinion that I get. But it's just
I didn't
very
really.
strange.
I didn't really, yeah, no, it is. I don't really have a distinct opinion on that, you know, and I like to have concrete opinions on things, you know, and if anybody has a different opinion, you can, but like some of the facts in there are, he wrestles with him all night. We would look at God in a human form as if, I mean, he's got the 1, 2, 3 pin within seconds, you know. And not to say that Jesus had superhuman strength, you know. No, he did not, and he's God in human form as well. But we would look at it as if, why would it take him all night to wrestle with just Jacob, you know, who, although, yes, there's a lot more said to it than the actual event itself. There's a lot more to take out of it than the actual event. But the event itself is something. Peniel, which is a place in Israel, just right on the outside of Israel. You can go there to this day. Another neat thing that I was looking at this week is Seir, the place where Jacob meets Esau when he comes back. That's another place that is well established in Israel, where they, you know, you can go and see this place where they stood after he comes up out of the ford of Jabbok, and very, very cool for me. I haven't been to those places yet, but they're on my list, you know. But back to the angel or the messenger. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Why, if this is God in human form, because his words are, "I saw the face of God in this," you know. There should be a couple more lines in there. Yes. Yeah. And you know, we as humans, especially in 2020, we want everything answered. Yeah, we want it all. Why does it not say this? You know, that's not the point of it. I guess it's good, you know. Yeah, the point of it is Jacob was one who wrestled, and then he became, you know, he's on easy street after that to some degree.
I guess the question for me is, why would
He just randomly decided, hey, I'm going to wrestle you.
yeah, I mean, like, I don't really know.
Is he stopping him from coming back? That's a good question. Is he at this pass on the road there, and he's like, you can't come back until we've changed you? You know, I don't know. I kind of just made that up on the spot, just throwing it out there. No, but I mean, could that be the case? You know, I don't know. Is there something much more to it than, I can't let you come back as the deceiver? We're going to have to stop this. You know, I don't know. There's many questions in there. It's pretty good. I don't know.
It's a lot to try to brief yourself, think about, and digest.
What does he mean exactly by he's been shown the face of God? That's a good question. Is he talking about just forgiveness in general? Is he talking about receiving this blessing?
For who he is,
But then he said, and I survived.
Right.
So, I mean,
Meaning that the typical understanding of it is, if you can't see the face of God, you know,
What did she say?
that he survived. It says, and he lived after it. Yeah, that's an important part to it for sure, because our understanding would be that's the surprise of it, you know.
You almost wonder there if the words mean that he really didn't actually see him like Moses, you know, had to look away.
Mhm.
He just really saw him for who he is and had that real change. I don't know.
Oh, right. No, right. I agree. You know, it's very interesting. Looking on the face of God is an interesting thing, you know, because we have all these people. You know, he's there with Adam and Eve in the garden. How's he there with them? You know, it says that he walks with Enoch. He, you know, he's talking throughout, you know, Genesis to these people. Is it just an audible voice that they hear in the air? Is it just in their head? How is that delivered? You know, I don't know. It's a good question. We need a couple more lines in there, you know. One day we'll know. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's very true. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Hopefully. I don't know anything about those books, no. They haven't given them out yet? Oh, okay. I don't know.
Rick, I mean, the person I asked would be Rick,
Oh, okay.
because Miss Debbie does you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like the books. I just felt like, and you know, the books, I don't know. I feel like sometimes that I want a different perspective on things, and so in our class we kind of, I don't want to say do things wrongly, but we just kind of go with a different things sometimes. You know, I like to look at different perspectives, and help me understand it a little bit better. I think that's good, and sometimes those are offered in the book too. Yeah, but we'll get with Rick and maybe he'll have those. I don't know, but don't be hogging that. Anyway, let me turn this thing off. If anybody has any prayer requests or things you'd like for us to